Well, just lots of going out together as you do in a new relationship, wining, dining, courtship, going to the pictures, meeting friends occasionally. And looking back, I realise now I always paid for everything as well. It seemed, it was my first ever relationship anyhow, but it seemed like everybody else's relationships. I actually didn't realise or see it or know that it was abuse until many years later. Looking back from pretty much the beginning, she would insist on me being there at a certain time to pick her up. And yet I would be there on time and she would never, ever be ready and leave me waiting for maybe a couple of hours easily. When we were out with friends, things would appear normal in the beginning of the evening. And then all of a sudden, that regular occurrence of I would come back from the bar or the toilet or suddenly realise she wasn't speaking to me, she'd be giving me the silent treatment, and we would leave our company always early. And I would ask her what it was about, and that would go on into the small hours of the morning. She would never give me a reason. But now I understand and realise that that was she wasn't getting the attention, she was needy. Um, so again, I didn't realise it at the time. She just wasn't getting the attention that she needed or needs. Well, there was continuous bickering about issues that I thought, what is this all about? I don't even know what we're bickering and arguing about. It would leave me feeling confused, stressed, distressed. I suppose as time progressed, I found it difficult to separate fact from fiction. I did try to call the relationship off and did on a few occasions. What I know now was manipulation. She did make me laugh, and that worked. Somehow we always seemed to end up getting back together. But she constantly told me that I was mentally unstable, that I wasn't normal, that everybody else told her and agreed with her that what she was telling me, they were saying it to her, but she refused to tell me who was saying what. And then I was doubting family and friends because I didn't know who was saying anything and I didn't know how to approach them or, because I was keeping, the situation between us private. But the truth was, she wasn't talking to anybody because nobody was saying it, but I didn't know that at the time. She just undermined me and undermined me with the children. And that progressed to them becoming abusive, equally abusive to me. There's just so many things that, she would use. She had a very violent temper in the house, but never, ever, ever displayed it or showed it outside of the house. I would make a dinner and she would pick a row with me and then she wouldn't eat it. And if the children decided they didn't want something because, they didn't like it, that would have all gone in the bin as well. I was constantly told about how I said things and the tone of how I said it. I was told I was living in the past, I wasn't moving on, and I'd say, well, look, I'm moving on, but you just continue from yesterday to today. And that's how it was. It never, there was no let up with her behaviour. Lots of name calling and, seriously, seriously bad language, calling me a cunt and an effing bastard, and um, also allowing the children to speak to me like that. She slapped me across the face on multiple occasions. I tried to pull my hair, pull my ears. She turned on me and stuck her nails in the back of my neck and broke the skin and had me bleeding like that. And it just got worse as the marriage progressed. The years went by. Well, there was always lots of bickering and issues that I used to question, what is it? we're actually arguing about, or what is the problem. And that would leave me feeling confused, very distressed. I began to self-doubt, didn't know fact from fiction anymore, didn't know who I could trust because, apparently everyone else, friends and family were sort of, confirming what she was telling me, that wasn't normal, I wasn't stable, my tone, my way, everything about me there was a criticism about it. So, I became so worn down that eventually I was driven to the point of actually attempting to take my own life. And at that point, that's when I realized that no relationship was worth taking my life for. Unfortunately, I think a lot of male suicides and deaths are that would be contributed because people have just, whether they meant to or otherwise, so despairingly have ended their lives because of the abuse and alienation from their children and blame and just everything that abuse abusive relationships from someone who's meant to love you unconditionally deals you, and you're trying to do your best for them. It's not about for myself, it's for both of us, it's for all of us as a family. And they just destroy that no matter how, and the more you give and the more you do, the more they seem to up the ante of their behaviour and abuse. And it just leaves you completely confused, extremely low self-esteem, and it does bring you to despair and suicidal thoughts and depression and everything that goes into that. And you do become mentally unwell. Of course, it affects your work life as well, and friendships and relationships, because they try to alienate you not only from your children, if that's what they're at, but your friends and your family. Well, I stayed in a marriage because that was what I wanted, and we had children. I wanted the family life that I knew and grew up with for our children and for us as a family. I truly did love love my wife, and I did not want our marriage to end. She would have me at rock bottom, and I would be thinking, I can't live like this any longer. But I didn't have the courage to leave for a long, long time. I didn't, well, part of me didn't want to leave. I didn't, I lived in the hope that we could resolve it. Then we'd have days that were good, and I would think, oh, maybe we've turned the corner. No matter how many times we turned that corner, I still believe that maybe on this occasion we would make it. But the situation worsened, and I realized that I could no longer, if I had any self-respect for myself, I was going to end up either dead or in an institution, because I could no longer remain there. There's also a lot of fear, leaving children, financial fear, what is this going to cost? Leaving our home, everything, going to be on my own again. But I would say to anyone, those are all fears that I think every single man or person thinking of leaving their relationship would experience. But ultimately, I reached a point where houses, money, or nothing meant anything to me. And it was my sanity and my own well-being that was the most important thing. And whilst it was extremely difficult, even finding the courage to leave. I mean, I didn't even know if I could leave on the day I did leave, but it's not been easy, but it's definitely been the right decision for all of us. Well, after decades of being together, the situation became so toxic, volatile, unhealthy for every single one of us. I couldn't do right. Also, the relationship had become, never on my part, but it had become physically abusive. And that changed everything again. And ultimately, that was a catalyst for my final decision that I could no longer, if I had any respect for myself and my own well-being, I had to leave. And I was also advised by my doctor that it was time for me to go. I was heartbroken, I was devastated, but I would encourage anybody, you have to find the courage to go. My doctor used to ask me, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? I couldn't decipher what exactly he was saying to me in that comment, but basically he can't advise me. But ultimately, the situation reached that point where he said to me, you have to leave. That wasn't safe for any of us either. I left, brokenhearted and everything else, but I'm a lot. I'm living in peace now. Maybe not how I imagined or hoped I would be at this stage of my life, but I'm living in a lot happier, uh, in peace and quiet. And well, I had kept the details of our marriage problems to myself for years. What I did share with a very few friends was only part of the story, because whereas I was desperately unhappy, I was still trying to protect our relationship. I felt ashamed. I didn't understand myself what was wrong. I just knew it wasn't a happy relationship. But I said that I had attempted to take my own life, and that's when I realized that no one is worth taking your life for. And that prompted me to actually start the journey of actually my road to recovery, and self-help. And I sought out the help of a counsellor. I'd never been to counselling before. The waiting lists are months. You get 1 hour a week, and it's difficult to tell your story of decades to somebody in an hour. Counselling for me, I have mixed feelings about it, because um, today I have much better understanding, but I felt I was talking alone for months. Eventually, the word abuse was mentioned, and I was referred to a book called The Emotionally Abusive Relationship by Beverly Engel. It was my life. It scared the life out of me, because it was my life in that book, but it also made me realize what it was I was living. I couldn't believe that everything that was happening in my life was illustrated in this book. I got counselling, as I say. I went to my doctor, and he wanted to prescribe me antidepressants. He suggested going to Relate. My wife wouldn't go. She was saying that it wasn't her problem, it was my problem. As I said earlier, my doctor used to ask me what was I going to do with the rest of my life, and I couldn't decipher or fully understand what he meant by that at that time. Eventually, he recommended that I get in touch with domestic violence. I was totally devastated and broke down in the surgery, thinking I couldn't believe that my life had reached this point. It reminded me of being part of a Jeremy Kyle show, which I believe I fit into. But I contacted them, and they told me to get in touch with. I'd never heard of any of these. Of course, I had the difficulty of finding the time to go to that, to register with them without my wife knowing. I had the exhaustion, I was exhausted telling my story over again to people. However, I felt that there was perhaps some light coming, because they had assigned me to a counsellor, told me it would be a few weeks before I could meet with him, because they were busy. The weeks and months passed, and I called back and asked, said I was really desperate to get support, help. So I was given the same answer. And that happened on several occasions. And ultimately, as I give you or speak to you right now, all those years ago, I've never heard from them. Um, and again, I know that I was out there really trying to get help for myself and couldn't find it. That's why I think something like Manny and any group, there's a major lack of help for men in every aspect of this. I spoke to a police friend of mine. I was embarrassed to share that, you know, I felt, he'd be surprised that, of course, they've seen a life from all angles. And I said that I would like to perhaps make a statement to, illustrate what's going on in my marriage, but not to place any charges, but just to protect me. And I was told in no uncertain terms that that would not be a good idea, because the police would believe my wife and my children regardless. He also said that I could end up getting arrested in my own home. I could end up with a criminal record. It could destroy me, my job, and everything else. So, was I believed and supported? Absolutely not. Um, and that really, I mean, I think to the lowest I could possibly go. At that time, I went back to my doctor because I wasn't suicidal, but I said, look, I've been suicidal before. I says, I can't find any help. I've been to domestic violence. I've been to uh, I went down all avenues, including, from clinical to religious. And I went and saw a priest, expecting him to say, go home and work on your marriage. He said, you've got an hour with me. And at the end of the hour, he said, God would not expect you to live or ask you to live like this. And that probably was more defining and more helpful to me than anything that I had discussed with anyone else. I did go back to my doctor and I said, look, I am absolutely desperate. I can't wait 18 months, which was the case at the time. I need help now. And I've got an urgent referral and allocated 10 sessions. When the counsellor realised her words were the gravity of the abuse I was living in, she said that 10 would not be enough. During the second 10 sessions, I actually left my marriage. So she said, I can't leave you hanging here, because we were also at the end of our second 10 weeks. So I was with him for 30 weeks or whatever. And that definitely, had I not had that at the time, I'm not sure where I would have been. I just found there was no support and nowhere to really go. People can't wait. I mean, I think most of us probably we stay a long time and we live a long time in silence before we actually speak to anyone or admit to ourselves that there is a real problem. And by that time, getting help, you need it there and then. And I know that might not always be easy, but I do believe that many people are not here because the help wasn't there. Well, it left me completely broken. I was heartbroken. The scars are very deep. They have faded, and they have faded a lot, but they will always be there. The most difficult point or experience has been the alienation from my children and how their minds have been manipulated against me. And whilst I do now have a relationship with them, I would describe it as, at best, fragile. I can understand why they would think like that, because I didn't know or understand myself as an adult living in a marriage with someone that for decades what was going on. They were born into a drip feed of, unbeknownst to me, poor imagery of me. She was jealous of me and my relationship with the children. So it took years to reveal that and understand that and, and know it. So having my good name tainted by lies, the financial fallout from it, just incredibly sad, really. And there's a saying, I'm not where I want to be, but I thank God I'm not where I used to be. And I think that describes how I feel. And I certainly am a much happier, more living a nice, peaceful life. Um, Maybe not with the people in it that I would have hoped as much, but it's much better. After my experience that I've told you about, and I would encourage anyone who is currently living in or has found the courage to leave, these relationships are never going to mend, they are never going to improve. And please don't suffer in silence. Groups like Manny that are new are, there needs to be more groups like them and they need to be recognised, acknowledged, and please support them, please go to them, and someone there will listen to you. You will be supported, you will be believed. Don't do it alone. It's not an easy journey. It may appear like it's easier to stay than go, but ultimately, these relationships are never going to get any better if you've any self love, self respect. I'm not promoting leaving your marriage, but I'm certainly promoting not staying in an abusive, narcissistic relationship that will not ever have a happy ending. And I do believe that all suicide, well, many suicides, male suicides, are due to the lack of help available, which is why we need more groups like Manny, and for authorities across the country to recognise that women are not the only victims of abuse. And of course, anyone who's a victim of abuse, whether it's men, women, or children, all need support. Men just don't have it. And I hope and trust that we're going to see changes.